Finally, this should be our last video in our Q storage series. Let me share my screen. So in the last few weeks, we've been doing a lot around Q, Azure Q service. In this video, we'll be combining all the skills that we've been learning, and we are going to be looking at a real life scenario. We are going to be combining what we've learned from Q storage, combining it with table storage as well as function service. And we are going to be painting a real life scenario. So before I go into my scenario, because I will be explaining what we really want to do, is I want us to see what we have on Azure portal first, just to have a feel on what we are doing. So over here, this is my queue. And you can see that I have a queue called second queue, and there are no messages here. So it's empty right now. Then we have a table storage, and we have three tables here: country, customers, and passport requests. We are going to be using just passport requests. So let's take note of that. Then in the case of the function service, I will not be using the function service on Azure. I'll be using the one on Visual Studio. So I'll be running my serverless functions in Visual Studio, but they will be connecting to databases on Azure. So that's just to simplify what we are really doing. If you like, you can use the function service on Azure. I believe in our previous videos, we looked at how to work with function service, but I just do not want to use it here. So let me paint my scenario. Yeah, so speaking about queues, before I even paint my scenario, let me just paint a simple analogy that is common with queues. So imagine you are at a restaurant, you want to give an order, you ask to see the salesperson or the hostess or something, and you tell him what you want to have for dinner or lunch or breakfast. Then the personnel tells you if what you're asking is still available. It might be on the menu, does not mean it's available. So it tells you what is available. It advises you on what you can combine with what you want and how you can get the best out of your lunch. Then it takes some time. He walks to the kitchen, put what you want together. Then after a while, he gets you what you want. Then let's also consider that while you were, after you came into the restaurant, some other persons came also, but they try to answer you first before answering persons that comes after you. So this simple analogy pictures how a queue really works, and the way it works in Azure is not different from how it works in real life. The only difference is that we have a digital scenario on Azure, and in real life we are looking at a more analog scenario. So you come in, you when you come in and you make a request, so that is like adding a message to a queue. Then when you make a request, you provide some details on what you want. So that details can be stored in a database. Then the personnel comes in and refines what you want. So that process of refining what you want, which is in a database, we can call that a function. So a function is being called to perform some kind of operation on your data store. Then afterwards, after refinement of what you want, after refinement of your data store, then it now presents to you what you can have. that is now another data store that contains what will be given to you. Then another thing to consider is that after what is being given to you is accepted, then you are now dequeued. So you are now freed up. You are now taken out of the queue for another person to come in. So that's just what we are going to do. That's essentially what queues are all about. However, the scenario that I will be providing, the data that we are going to be using are more likened to a passport application process, the passport application process. So let me go to Visual Studio now. I believe you've seen the scenario that I've painted um, provides more clarity on what we are really doing. So what we really want to do is I want to apply for a passport. So I want to apply for an international passport. So let me share my Visual Studio first so that you would see what I'm speaking from and I wouldn't just be talking on my own. Yeah, so I want to apply for a passport. I visit a passport application house or center or whatever they call it. So I tell them my some of my details like my NIN, my state of origin, my age, my name, my image, my passport photograph, and so many other details. So after submitting my details, so let's assume that I use an application. So let's assume that they have an application that I can use to submit those information. Let's remove the fact that I would go to their office first. Let's assume it can be done remotely. I believe there are some countries that you can apply for your passports remotely. So let's assume they have an application. I log into it. I provide my NIN, states, my passport photograph, my date of birth, my name, because those are what we are going to be doing. We are going to be providing those information to our function. So let me paint the scenario first. So I provide all that information via an application. Then those information that I provide, it's now stored in a database, in a data store. So let's assume that data store is a storage account. So whether those information I'm providing are correct, whether they are valid or invalid, it doesn't matter. They need to be stored somewhere. So let's assume they are stored in a blob container or something. Then that's my information. After I submit that information via that application, and that application is connected to a blob container. After I submit that application, my passport request, after I submit that, it will send a message to a queue. So that message is what will now trigger a function that someone have submitted a passport request. So it will call the function to come and perform some operation on the submitted data. I believe people are understanding what I am explaining, because if you don't understand it, I will just come and give you application and show you that the application is running and you see that it is running, but you will not really know what we are really doing. And programming is not just being able to run the program. You need to understand what it is really doing. Many of all these codes here, I got them from Microsoft documentation, but there needs to be for you to be able to make it to meet your own needs, for you to be able to customize it to your own liking, you need to understand what the program is actually doing. That's why this understanding is important. So let me continue before I digress. So after submitting my passport request to a data store, that data store will add a message to a queue. That queue will now trigger a function that function will now come into the data store and perform some kind of operation. So it is that function that will now kind of like validate that some of the information that I've submitted are correct. So that function can trigger several applications. That function can trigger a BVN validation application that will confirm that the BVN number that I submitted is correct. That function can also trigger an NIN validating application that will check that the NIN number that I submitted is accurate. That function can also trigger a cybercrime unit from police that will confirm that my name is not among one of the most wanted people in Nigeria or something. So probably I shouldn't be allowed to apply for a passport. I shouldn't be issued an international passport. Maybe the government have blacklisted me or something. So that function can trigger several applications based on the message in the queue. So after that, so let's now assume that there was no issue. Let's assume I am a clean person and all the validating applications that was triggered by the queue message and the function were valid. So my date of birth, my age, my name, my NIN, my BVN, my passport, everything, they were all valid. So in that case, then my passport information, that's the validated passport information that will be issued by the immigration office, that will now need to be stored in another data store. So that will now need to be stored in another data store that is different from the initial one that contains unvalidated data. So after that, then my message in the queue will now be dequeued. So I will now be removed from the queue for other persons that are yet to be validated to be pushed forward in the queue. You know, we started with enqueuing data and dequeuing data. So I will now be dequeued. I believe my explanation is clear. I don't know how else I can explain it. So I'm going to the code now. I've explained the reasoning around it. So I'm going to the programming now. Hopefully what I've explained makes sense. Yeah, so now we have two functions. We have get passport info. That's the name of our class. And over here, we have get passport info. We are triggering a get passport info function. That's the name of this function that is in this class. Then we are appending this table. So this table that we have here is where the validated information will be stored. So I already created a table, Azure table storage. The table is hosted in Azure. It's not local, even though my function is local. And the table is called passport request. That was what I showed you at the beginning. And I'm using my connection string. So I am not using the connection string. I'm not hard coding the connection string in my code. The connection string, the value is in a secret file, like an environment variable that Visual Studio provides. So this is what I called it, but you are not going to see the connection string here. This is the best practice when it comes to approaching connection string. I could have chosen to use an Azure Key Vault if I wanted to store it on Azure, but I do not want to store it on Azure. I want to store it in my local computer safely, securely. So that's why I'm using a name here. Then over here, this is where the action is happening. We are just trying to retrieve the content of my queue storage. So this where we are triggering, the queue is being triggered here. The name of the queue is second queue. And we're also using the connection string here. And we are logging some kind of data. Now, this is where the interesting part, this is where what I find interesting. So from the, I said that a message will be added to the queue. And it is from that message that the unvalidated data will be stored in a data store. So the message now that we are submitting contains the following information. The message contains the name of the person that is requesting for the passport. The message also contains the NIN number. It contains the state of origin. It also contains the age of the person. So these are the information that I'm using to pass on information to my table storage. So I'm using this to create my partition key, my row key, the states and the age, which will all be in the table storage. Yeah, so without talking too much, let me just run this program. So the moment I run this program, so let me run it and we'll see what I am. So I also have a passport request that looks like a model that contains what I want to pass on to my table storage. This is it here. So the moment I run this function, so let me run it, then I will share the output so that you see what I'm saying. Yeah, it's running. So let me go to let me share the output screen. Yeah, so this is the output screen now. So this output screen needs to be running. So the moment this function is running, if there's any change, if there's any new message in my queue, if there's any new message, any request for a new passport added to my queue, then this function will get triggered and it will then pass it on to the table storage. It will do some kind of validation, even though I am not really performing any real checks, but it will then pass it on to the table storage. So you can see it is running now. Let's now go to our Azure queue and add our queue to it. So let me add my my queue to it. Let me add a message to the queue. So I'm going to Azure now. Let me reshare. I'm going to Azure. Yeah, so let me go to my queue. This is the storage account. I mean, this is the table, yeah, the table storage. Just take note of what we have here. It is empty at the moment. It will be empty. So now let's go to our queue. I'm adding a new message. This is the message I am adding. The message I'm adding to the queue is like a request. The person is submitting his NIN, his state of origin, his age, his name, and the likes. So the person is submitting it. Bam. The person has submitted that information now. So now let us now go to our function in Visual Studio. Let's see how this would affect our output screen. Yeah, so look at it now. It has triggered this function. So this function has been triggered now. So now let us now go to our table storage. Let's see what is being stored there. So it has been triggered. Some validation I've done have occurred to confirm that the NIN is correct, the state of origin is correct, the age is correct, the name is correct, that police have not blacklisted this person, that this person known as Salahuddin Adebanke is eligible to request for an international passport, blah, 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 blah. So now let's go to our storage. our table storage now. So let's see if that person have a passport now in the data store, validated data. So we are going here now. Let me refresh. I'm refreshing. Bam. And now we can see that the data have been stored here. So now this person is eligible to get a passport. So what will now happen is that some other application will come and retrieve data from this database of validated passport information, so that that person, it might be sent to the person via email or through waybill, that his passport is available, and it will be sent to the person that he should get his passport after some kind of authorization. Or another application can even get it, and the person can log on to another application and be able to download his passport information. So I believe with this very brief video, we get some clearer understanding on how queues work. When you think about this queue storage, it's something that, just think about a restaurant, think about anything that requires lining up. The way you line up, you queue for something, is the same way it works over here. It's just that over here we are writing programs, but those programs are they are in sync with what is happening in real life. So this is where we put an end to our queue storage. We still have we have not touched on file share, but the reason why we haven't touched on that yet is because that is very easy to, we can do all we need to do about that in a single video. But in subsequent videos now, we are looking at Cosmos DB, Azure Cosmos DB. Very interesting topic. Still around storing data. It's like Azure answer to databases. It's highly available. It's a managed database. It's very special. What Cosmos DB will actually give you, an SQL database, and Oracle, and all the popular databases that we have, they will not give it to you. They will not give it to you, except they are being managed in another cloud provider. But ordinarily, all the conventional databases will not give you what Cosmos DB will give you. I mean, Cosmos DB it works with key value. It uses key value pairs. That's not something you see in conventional databases. Key value pairs. It's a cloud database, so it's very special. It's something that you'll find very interesting, as much as I did. So let's put a stop here, and we will continue another time. Have a nice day. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video.